We all know that real estate has created more millionaires than any other industry on the planet. We also know that it has created a lot of heartache due to mismanagement, overborrowing, and just simple life events that happen to all of us. Welcome to the Cash Flow Pro podcast. My name is Casey Brown, and I am your fearless leader. And although we might be bourbon sipping and at times foul-mouthed Southerners, we will always do our best to be honest, straightforward, and due diligent with all of the information we pass along to you. Welcome to the show. Hey there, and welcome to today's episode of Cash Flow Pro, your daily real estate investing podcast and YouTube channel. Today I'm here with Aaron Zucker of Zucker Investment Group. And I was just talking to him. We were just talking about all these deals he's got going on, all this money he's making, and we're hoping we're going to figure out how we can learn something from you. Aaron, how are you today?
I'm doing well, except there's a big set of shoes to fill after that introduction. You got the property part right. I don't know if we're making any money or not, but
I understand, man. I understand. No, it's all about trying to get things in line and get it in order, so that not necessarily about the raising capital, but about the investors making money. So that's really what we want to hear about. We want to hear a little bit about how you got started and what kind of set your sights on the commercial real estate business, and then of course how you help and assist your investors in placing their capital and ultimately making them money.
Sure. So it all started in a bar, like any other good story does.
I wouldn't trust the story if somebody said it started elsewhere. So
there you go. So some friends and I were in college at the University of Alabama, Roll Tide.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yep. I didn't get a chance to dig into what school you're a fan of.
UK.
All right. So you can have basketball season, and we'll take football season, and we'll try to. Although we've been competitive in basketball. Anyway, so I was a junior in school. It was my junior year. That's right. And so buddies and I were doing what drinking, stupid college kids do. We were just shooting the breeze. Sure. And we one night got onto the conversation of how crazy we were for paying $3 for a Bud Light when the bar we could have bought it from the gas station for, call it a buck a can or whatever. Maybe the 12-pack went for $9 or whatever it is. So let's call it 75 cents. And we just thought that was such a crazy business. And we thought it would be really cool, just like any other group of idiot drinking college guys thought it would be, to buy a bar, right? Yep. The only difference between our conversation and every other conversation that goes on across college campuses throughout the country is that we were crazy enough and actually tried to do it and then ended up doing it. So we went out the next day, just started knocking on doors, and ran into a bar owner who was interested in selling. One thing led to another. We actually convinced him to do seller financing, which took down the line's share of the capital stack there. And made the transaction like something that felt attainable, even though it felt like it could have been the same as $50 million. You know what I mean? Sure. Obviously, it was nowhere near that amount, but it seemed like such an insurmountable amount of money. But it was good because it made us uncomfortable, and we were able to get it figured out. Yep. So he took on the lion's share of the capital stack. We each begged, borrowed, and stole, as I like to tell people, emphasis on the begging and the borrowing, not as much stealing, from friends and family to come up with the balance. And we bought a bar. Wow. It was exactly what you expected it to sound like, Casey. It was underage girls, getting underage girls in so the guys would show up to use their parents' money. So it was a very cyclical business. It was OPM, other people's money. That was the first time I was ever introduced to that concept, even before getting into real estate. So I was on the operating side. I say that loosely. I mean, we didn't know what we were doing. Sales, they say, on Shark Tank, they'll often say like sales cures all. Sales did cure a lot of our problems, right? We had revenue coming in the door, and we sort of figured out a way to trim expenses and not give away too much booze. And we sort of learned by jumping head first in with no snorkels or floaties on. Yep. So about a month or two into the venture, or I should say adventure, it was my turn to bring our rent check over to the landlord. Yep. And so I went over to the landlord's office and knocked, and no one was there. It was the middle of, I think it was like a Thursday afternoon. It was kind of crazy. And no one answered. And I saw the sign on the door sort of relaying the office hours. And it was 9 to 12, Monday through Thursday, closed Fridays. And I went back with the check. Or maybe I left the check under the door. I don't remember what I did, but I went back to the bar and I told my partners and our employees, I said, guys, where's the landlord? Like, I don't understand. It's the middle of like a business day. That's why I went over there. Like, I'm frustrated that I wasted my time dropping this check off. And they go, Zuck, that guy is never there. He's on the golf course. I was like, really? And they're like, yeah, he owns 400 properties like the one that, like this one, and he's collecting rent. He's taking our rent money and using it to pay his greens fees.
Wow.
I was thinking to myself, wait a second. He's playing golf, and I'm staying up till 3 a.m, cleaning up beer bottles and making sure that we don't get sued every night with my friends just to pay this guy rent so he can play golf. I think I'd rather be the guy that's collecting the rent.
Yes, sir. There you go.
That was my first epiphany. But unfortunately, Casey, I'm not the sharpest knife in the drawer. So it took me another slap in the face to realize that that if I was really going to become a landlord, that I needed like another euphoric epiphany type moment. Okay. So that summer, I ended up getting an internship in an unrelated field at a sports agency, actually, in Atlanta. And I was home visiting family leading up to the internship in Charlotte, where I'm from. Okay. And I ran into a family friend, and he said, you ought to hook up with my son. He's got a 2-bedroom condo in a great area of town, and maybe he'll have you for the summer or whatever. Sure. So I go down to Atlanta for my couple weeks before my internship, and I meet up with this guy who's like 5 years older than me. He lives in this gorgeous condo in Buckhead, which was and still is widely regarded as like the happening place in Atlanta, floor to ceiling windows, whatever. And I just looked at him. I'm like, what do you do? Because this guy's 27 years old or something like that, 26 years old. And he's coming across and created the illusion like he's making a bunch of money. Yeah. And he points out his floor to ceiling windows. I'll never forget. And he's like, you see those shopping centers out there? And I'm like, yeah, what about it? He's like, the company that I work for owns shopping centers like that. They pay me to find tenants for vacancies, whether if it's a nail salon for a little 1,200 square foot space or a grocery store for 40,000 feet. Okay. And by the way, you seem like a pretty personable guy. You should consider doing it after school. It's a great business. You do well on it. Thank God for Stuart Miller, because he turned me on to, between the bar story and that, the light bulb really went off, and I said, okay, if you can make this kind of money working for someone else, and you can really set yourself up for life by being the landlord yourself, this is and apparently it's fun, and you don't have to have straight A's to do it. This is my calling. This is what I meant to do. So I go back to Tuscaloosa, finish my degree, moved to Atlanta. One of my partners stuck around the bar to run it, and Stuart was kind enough to introduce me to some people, and I just hustled around Atlanta until I got a job. And so I started at DLC Management, based out of New York, who had a satellite office in Atlanta. It took a flyer on me as a leasing agent to learn the business. And I knew within about a couple of days, not weeks, that I wanted to own properties. And this is exactly what I wanted to do. And I was learning how they were structuring them. And so I started off leasing value-add shopping centers with them, learning from great mentors in the business. And not too long thereafter, I had an opportunity by meeting someone at a cocktail party who offered me an opportunity to move back to Charlotte, where I would get my own portfolio of properties to lease. Okay. And so I moved back to Charlotte, which was exciting to me. It was where I was from. It was an opportunity to be close to family, and started leasing space for Phillips Edison and Company, who was at the time the largest privately held grocery anchored shopping center REIT in the country. And now they're, as of call it a year ago, are publicly traded, and those people are doing quite well. So I spent some time leasing there. Okay. And the way I like to describe my job there is I was leasing grocery anchored shopping centers on the wrong side of town with no grocery store.
Okay.
So Winn-Dixie or Food Lion or Bilo would leave, and I was out there trying to convince the Chinese restaurant to take the second generation restaurant space in 2,000 feet. Or getting Tractor Supply to try to take the old grocery store box, or getting a thrift store to take the old CVS pharmacy. Because CVS pharmacy, if you recall, or Walgreens for that matter, they would lease space, or Dollar General. It was either Dollar General, Family Dollar, CVS, or Walgreens would always take the 700 to 8,500 square foot box adjacent to the grocery store. Unfortunately, all four of those concepts went freestanding. Yep. well, I guess fortunately for me, because it created opportunity. And so I was out there begging the thrift store to backfill those spaces and doing anything and everything I could to get spaces leased, door knocking, cold calling, building relationships with brokers, and quite literally begging national retailers to take space.
Sure. It seems a little bit like
Uh,
a pull, also probably pulling a little hair out along the way.
yeah, for sure. For sure. I didn't, but you don't know what you don't know.
That's right.
I would get in the car. They paid for all my expenses, right? Because I worked in house at a landlord, and I'd get in the car on Tuesday, and I would just drive until Friday morning, Thursday night or Friday morning, and I'd go to happening places like Marion, North Carolina, and Lawrence, South Carolina.
Yep.
And when I say happening, I mean nothing's happening.
Yep.
And I would just figure it out. And that really was an opportunity for me to cut my teeth. Fast forward a couple years later, a headhunter had reached out to me about an opportunity in Atlanta that I passed on, and I went back to that headhunter and said, "Hey, I'm more receptive to leaving." This was at the time I thought was confident, but probably flirted with the lines of arrogant because I was like 26. I told him, "Listen, if you have like a director or like a VP role, even if it's at a smaller company, I want to lead a team of leasing people. Like that's what I want to do."
Yep.
And so the headhunter was like, "Okay." And so he calls me back there because there were some, mid-level jobs available at other REITs, and he started explaining these jobs to me, and they weren't interesting because it was very similar to what I'd already been doing until he got to the last opportunity, which was a head of leasing job at a family office down in South Florida. And he explained to me very clearly that I was underqualified and explained to me very clearly that there were some complicated dynamics there due to some unfortunate situations with the family and due to a tragedy, and it was complicated.
Okay.
But he explained the role to me, just purely on paper, the role, and he explained how great the family was. And I said, "Okay, I'd like to take a run at that." And he said, "Great, you have a slim chance at best, but let's at least put your name in there because these guys have interviewed a ton of people and nothing's worked out yet."
Okay.
And I interviewed, and for whatever reason, I don't know if it's because I was leasing spaces that probably shouldn't have been leased at Phillips Edison, or if it was just a connection that we'd had. But the Wiener family, who owns PEBB Enterprises, was kind enough and fortunately for me, willing to take a flyer on me. And so they offered me the opportunity to be the director or head of leasing or whatever, which eventually, like I think my title when I left, it was all the same thing, was SVP of leasing.
Gotcha. Okay.
So sort of it was an opportunity to become a big fish in a small pond.
Yep.
And it was my big break for sure, because not only was I going to make more money than I'd ever made, yep, I was going to be in the room, and I had the opportunity to be in the room when they were talking about refinancing and who to hire, who to fire, where to obtain debt from, how to negotiate the work letter on a lease, and everything in between. And the experience that I had at DLC and Phillips Edison, because they were larger organizations, was you're a leasing agent, go lease space, you're a leasing robot. And I definitely learned skills that, and I think became a very fine-tuned leasing robot. Okay. But the real like MBA, if you will, or a real big break opportunity came from my time at PEBB. And I can't thank the Wiener family enough for affording me that opportunity. It was certainly career changing. It got me where I wanted to be faster.
Sure. It's like a little shortcut. Well, and and that's, again, you're naming off all of the things that you, for instance, like, we've talked a lot about college and a lot about learning and stuff like that. And there's a lot of that stuff that, man, there's not a book anywhere that's going to teach you that. You know what I mean? There is, it's going to teach you the X's and O's, but it's not going to teach you where to move. Like when you see it in a real life scenario and it's real life profit, it's real life lives, it's real life money, it's real life, that's where the learning curve can really get, that's the fast track, I guess, in a way.
And just so I'm crystal clear, especially to the younger listeners that may be out there of your following, which I've obviously heard and excited to kind of get to know your podcast a little bit more. There was no better education for me than buying a bar in college. And it's certainly I guess the 2 years that I was in school that we owned it, plus the 3, not even factoring in the 3 years thereafter, far exceeded from a learning curve perspective anything that I ever learned in the classroom. So to your point, you couldn't be any more spot on. it's all about just getting in, rolling up your sleeves, and just doing it.
Yeah.
Not to sound like a Nike commercial, but
Yeah.
it is what it is.
And then that's exactly right. I mean, and if nothing else, when you saw that the landlord was not there at 1 o'clock on a Thursday, and you got to turn around and go back and work 8 more hours cleaning up vomit and beer bottles. I mean, it's just that's those, like, there's no textbook that's going to teach you that's going to say, hey, or at least give you the push to go be better than you were that day. So, but yeah, the I've often said, and of course you touched on a little bit there, that some of the property management stuff, and I almost lump, I guess, finding tenants into the property management space. Of course, there's, much like owning a bar, single family property management will make you want to do things that otherwise you wouldn't probably do, like jump off a cliff.
Right.
And so,
well, the old adage on property management, it's like baggage claim at the airport. Nobody's calling to tell you you're doing a wonderful job.
That's exactly right. Or yeah, it's so maddening. And I oftentimes, the first probably 10 years of my career, I had to deal with a lady here in town that was a property manager, and she was madder than hell every day. It didn't matter if you called her on a Tuesday. It didn't matter if you called her on a Thursday. It didn't matter if you called her at 2 in the afternoon or 10 in the morning. She was mad every day. And then it wasn't until I got into owning some of my own single family stuff that I realized, I was like, no wonder that lady's pissed off all the time. I mean, so I guess what I'm getting at is that's the stuff that really will, it'll make you realize what you don't want to do, but at the same time, it'll give you the feel and the know-how to know what you do want to do.
Sure.
And it seems like your story has a lot of that from a lot of different angles, even stepping back to the fact that you all had the bar owner hold the paper on the mortgage, or on the, whatever the business part of it. And, I guess some college students, if there's college students out there listening, could say, hey, I want to go buy a bar, and I don't care if I break even as long as I pay for what I drink. That's a little bit, we could call that bar hacking, similar to house hacking. You know what I mean?
Sure.
And so,
sure. Absolutely.
But anyway, so those are the real life things that people think that, people think that getting a seller to hold the mortgage, it means you're, I mean, I don't know what the idea there is behind a lot of people that think that they're too good to ask for that, or they're this or they're that. But man, there's been a lot of us, and I say us because I was the same way, that started out with the seller saying, you just ask them. And what's the difference in asking the seller, hey, it's paid for, you want to hold the money? You're not gonna reinvest. If they don't want to reinvest or whatever, you want to hold the money, and you might as well make the interest as anybody, and then it works out from there. So.
Right. I think he probably knew deep down we would never get a loan. I'm sure that had a lot to do with it.
Yep.
And I think the other side of it too was business probably wasn't so bad for him, although he certainly wasn't making money, but it wasn't so bad to a point to where if he recouped the bar back from us and just kind of pocketed whatever we had paid him to date, he'd be in the same situation he was in, plus a little upside. So
sure.
Certainly can resonate with what you're saying there.
Yeah, and of course, every situation is different, and especially, and it certainly is different when you're buying a business that does not have real estate attached to it versus buying a business that does.
I didn't even know what commercial real estate was when we bought the bar.
Wow! And how many?
No idea.
How many partners was it?
4.
4. So there's 4 of you. And so now not only the profit's getting cut into 4 parts there after everything is said and done, that's a tough go for sure. I'm certain. It was
not about, at the time, it wasn't about how much money can the 4 of us make. I mean, I think in reality, especially with anybody in our support system, it was more of how do we mitigate risk and de-risk the deal by having 4 of us instead of 2 or 3 or whatever.
Sure.
Hi, this is Casey Brown, host of the Cash Flow Pro podcast and YouTube channel. Have you been thinking about investing in real estate but just don't know where to begin? I'd like to help by inviting you to check out our website at www.3000capital.com. There you will find an array of material that will help you learn all about real estate syndication. And while you're there, be sure to check out our free video series download titled 5 Must-Know Keys to Success in Passive Real Estate Investing. I'd also like to personally thank you for making Cashflow Pro part of your day. Now, back to the show.
As I think more about it in hindsight, that was probably the real thought process if we're being transparent with each other.
Sure. So you're trying to just spread the risk, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. Well, if you get sued, at least you only own a quarter of it or whatever.
Yeah. So. And, and a lot of people don't realize the liability that goes along with the bar. Basically, like I know the state of Kentucky, if you if you are a bartender and somebody gives you a fake ID and you serve that person and they get busted with that fake ID while they're in your establishment while having a drink, the bartender's the one that gets in trouble.
Yeah, that's a tough go at it. I wish it was that way when I owned a bar. It wouldn't have been as risky as it was. I'm kidding.
And so it's just it's nuts the insurance policies and all on the anyway. That's enough about the bar. But I like the you mentioned the capital stack and you mentioned a lot of different things in that short segment there of experience. You mentioned a lot of things that, of course, are terms that we in the capital raising business and in the syndication business use all the time. And so it's pretty interesting. So why don't you tell us, let's kind of transition out of pre-Zucker Investment Group, and let's kind of go forward now with what do you have going on and what does the landscape look like today?
Sure. So just to wrap up on the PEBB side of it, which was my last job or last career opportunity, okay. I approached the Wiener family about becoming a partner. They respectfully declined, saying, "Hey, listen, we've been in business 40 years. We'll be fine without you."
Sure,
I mean,
sure.
They didn't say it that bluntly, but that was the message, which I respected. So I kind of got my affairs in order and moved into my parents' basement with a 6-month-old and moved back to Charlotte and started figuring it out. So this was at the end of beginning of 19.
Okay.
Started to dig, and we started buying value-add retail properties across the country. The first one was in Dallas, and we've done 22 total acquisitions and about $35 million so far of acquisitions across the country.
Okay.
We're in 13 states so far, and we focus pretty much exclusively on value-add unanchored retail deals.
Wow. Okay, now, before we go past that, explain, I know, of course, what it is, but I'd like for you to explain for the listener who might not exactly what you mean there.
Sure. So let's break it down. Value add, meaning it's worth X today, we intend to take it to Y, and Y better be greater than X. Okay. So we're buying vacant buildings or building ground up development on land or buying income producing shopping centers where there's an ability to increase the net operating income, i.e. the rent, by leasing space. I mean, this business that we now have is basically predicated on taking a leasing agent's mindset, which, as I shared before, is how I spent my entire career before going out on my own, and applying a way to increase the cash flow or the NOI or compress cap rates, or in an ideal situation, both.
Okay.
And when you take the retail component, it is exactly what it sounds like: buying vacant bank branches or little strip centers or whatever. But we're oftentimes found on high traffic count streets, with a lot of strong retail synergy. So we like to see big box stores like grocery stores, Target, Walmart, and just roll up our sleeves, apply our leasing secret sauce, if you will, and create value that way.
And you mentioned unanchored, and I'd like for you to explain what that is, and then of course, what does that strategy? Why do you like that strategy? Specifically the unanchored part.
Sure. So the unanchored component is of competitive space because the buyer pool is larger. Typically, unanchored deals are going to be smaller in deal size. We play really well in that like up to $7 to $10 million sandbox. Okay. The smaller the deal size, the more dynamic we can be, because our ability to close cash and our ability to oftentimes replicate or improve existing rents. Bigger rents yield to higher price points. So it's not that we steer away from $8 million deals. It's that typically those rents are either baked or it could be a bigger shopping center, which we certainly will chase as well.
Sure.
So the replaceability of tenants or the tenant demand is significantly higher on the unanchored product, typically because the bays are smaller, right? Yep. If you lose a 1,200 square foot tenant in a strip center, A, it doesn't impact the bottom line of the asset as much, and B, more importantly, the pool of tenants that are available to backfill that space is far greater than backfilling a 50,000 square foot former grocer. Trust me, I've been there.
Yeah, yep. And then now on the other side, the argument could be made, okay, if you're trying to fill that $50,000 slot, and you do, that those leases are either more they're more lucrative, or the tenant stays longer, or the lease is longer and there's greater security. So what have you found on the I mean, I guess obviously you found what works for you all, but on that balance, what does that kind of look like
with respect to
having an anchor tenant, a bigger anchor tenant? Or
listen, we love shadow anchor deals, meaning that the anchor tenant that's on the property to the common eye looks like it's a part of the shopping center. You'll see that often with Walmart and Target, where they actually own their own box.
Yeah.
And then the adjacent strip of shop spaces to it is typically owned by a private owner like ourselves.
Gotcha.
Yeah. So
shadow anchor, that's what you called that, right?
That's exactly right. Shadow anchor product. And we chase a lot of that. We're chasing out parcels to shopping centers. So the retail synergy is definitely something that we feed off of, and we aren't immune to taking big box sites down. I mean, we just bought a single tenant Planet Fitness. We're working on some other big box shopping centers throughout the country. And again, it all stems back to what I believe is our competitive advantage with the leasing background of having the relationships with the tenants and brokers, and being able to understand and underwrite what a quality store looks like, and knowing when Dollar Tree might be more likely to relocate as opposed to stay based on the size of their space, or whatever other patterns that we've become privy to just by being so obsessed and so niche focused and
Sure. Now so I know there's an element to the retail space, and again, and it's a little bit out of my wheelhouse, so I want to preface whatever is said next with, I'm asking purely from only knowing a few things about the retail space. So I'm wanting to just kind of look or dig into this part of it. But I know that there used to be a huge part of the retail real estate business where the company, like let's say you were leasing it to, again, let's just go back to a Chinese food restaurant or something like that, and the landlord getting a share of the profits or whatever. So is that anything that's even still existent today? Are you all pretty much just
percentage rent? Percentage rent is a real thing. It's definitely a more historically common thing from decades ago, but percentage rent is a very real thing. In our assets, not as much, just because we're in secondary and tertiary markets. But if you go to the prominent malls throughout the country, Gucci, Louis Vuitton, those higher end tenants, even some of the department stores, are often paying a fixed base rent with a percentage rent tied to sales on top of that base rent, because the quality of that real estate is so strong. So it does exist still. It's just not as common as it
and it's probably not as common on the smaller folks then, right? Like the smaller little restaurants or little local bag shops or something like that.
Correct. Your assumption's correct.
Interesting. Okay. All right. Well, good deal. Well, listen, we're kind of running out of time here, but I first off, I want to thank you for coming on today, and I want to thank you for sharing your experience and how you got where you are, because everybody has a story, and it's always interesting to hear what somebody else's path looked like and how they got there. But before we go, I want to ask you a couple of different questions. And the first being, what is the best book that you have recently read or hope to read in the near future?
About entrepreneurship or about real estate?
Whatever.
About real estate, if you're just getting started, I can't recommend strongly enough Investing in Retail Properties by Gary Rappaport.
Okay.
It's got more of a textbook type feel. It's something that I would strongly take meticulous notes on.
Okay.
Those concepts and that template really was instrumental in me formulating Zig from my head to a pen to paper.
Yep.
So from that standpoint, I would definitely go that route. I mean, books wise about just general entrepreneurship, Shoe Dog Phil Knight, unbelievable book.
Yes, absolutely.
I'm a big Entourage fan. I don't know if you remember that show from HBO, but The Gold Standard, written by the character Ari Gold, was both entertaining and informative. Probably the most entertaining book I've ever read. I would definitely read Richard Branson's book, Finding My Virginity. I would strongly suggest What It Takes.
Yep.
I think that's what Steven Schwartzman's book was called. And then, I mean, I've got a million others. I'm a pretty avid reader, but that's a good enough list to get to know.
I'm a big reader too, and I'm really, really bad about remembering titles with actually who wrote them. When you said Richard Branson's book, it's like that's one that you can never get. You never get
Finding My Virginity is
stuff, but you always remember that's what he wrote. So, but
no, the guy knows how to market. There's no question about it.
He's brilliant, and as a matter of fact, there was a guy on my show not long ago who said that they had their mastermind group had one of their trips was to Richard Branson's. I think it's an island he's got. I can't remember what it's called, but nevertheless, it was a mastermind trip down there. So speaking of, what is the best trip you've ever taken, or best trip you hope to ever take, vacation wise? Broad topic, I know.
Wow. That is a great question. The best trip that I've ever taken, went to Europe about 5 years ago. That was amazing.
Whereabouts?
With family. Italy and France.
Okay.
So it's Italy and France with family, which was amazing. But no, that's not true. That's not the best trip ever. Best trip I've ever been on was a trip to Israel.
Okay.
For 10 days. The state of Israel pays for Jewish American college age students, I should say, to come to Israel for 10 days.
Wow.
And they cover all the costs, and they show you the entire country and all the history behind it and what it means, and you eat your face off and go out and party, and it's like an unbelievable experience. So I would say that or my trip to Europe.
Awesome.
As far as a trip that I would like to take, I really want to see Greece. It looks beautiful. Yep. The food's amazing. I don't have that in my immediate future or anytime soon because of the commands with the building both the Zig business and then the other business that I'm a 50% owner in, which is being a franchisee of an urgent care brand.
Sure.
And so I think that the next trip that I'm most excited about is probably the next one, or maybe the one thereafter. I got to fly to Chicago for the day on Friday, but going to Vegas for 3-4 days for ICSC will be a good time. I'm looking forward to getting back out again and seeing everybody.
Awesome, man. All right. So listen, any of the listeners out there that may have connected with something you've said or connected with or wanted some more information on something you've said, or even possibly to discuss becoming an investor or coming in or talking about any of your deals, how is the best way for them to get in touch with you?
Yeah, look, we're hiring at Zig. We're looking for acquisitions people. So anybody who's willing to work extremely hard and learn the process and eventually become an owner in commercial real estate, there's certainly an opportunity there if they're willing and able to be in Charlotte.
Okay.
So I'd love to meet anybody from that standpoint, from an investor pool standpoint.
Is that a remote position, or is that something you said you want somebody there?
No, they need to be in Charlotte.
Gotcha. Okay.
Need to be in Charlotte.
All right.
From an investor standpoint, I'm not doing right by my investors right now because we don't have enough deal flow. We need more deal flow, which is why we're hiring for more acquisitions people.
Sure.
But anybody who wants to shoot the breeze, talk retail real estate, entrepreneurship, whatever, I'm pretty accessible. On Instagram, my handle is Aaron, Aaron, like Aaron, .Zucker. It's like Zuckerberg, but with no Berg.
Gotcha.
And on LinkedIn, I am who I am, Aaron Zucker. I'm the guy who looks 16. And obviously anybody who wants to find us can go to our website, www.zuckerinvestmentgroup.com. zuckerig.com or zuckerig.com.
Gotcha.
And I look forward to meeting whoever. These are always fun to do.
Man,
so
that's
thank you for
awesome. Well, thank you so much, Aaron. I appreciate you taking your time. And listeners, I want to thank you for joining us today on your daily real estate investing podcast. And thank you again for all of your time, Aaron, and all of the information you dropped here today.
Appreciate you having me, man. You're doing some awesome stuff. Thanks, Casey.
Thank you.
Cashflow Pro is hosted by Casey Brown, founder and CEO of 3000 Capital, a commercial real estate investment firm committed to providing its investors with ongoing cash flow and helping them build long-term wealth. If you enjoyed today's podcast, make sure to hit that subscribe button so you'll be notified about all our future episodes. You can find more information about us and our investment philosophy by clicking the link in the show notes below. Thanks for listening.